Thanks for staying with us. This is Newsline. I'm Michael Chigani. With me is Professor Daniel Sheck and human rights lawyer Michael Vittler. We're talking about a proposal, a controversial proposal to test you if you've taken drugs, even though you don't have drugs on you. Now, Professor Sheck, Michael Vittler said before the break that even if the police officer is trained, he listed a number of drugs that can cause a dilation of pupils, even legal drugs, not illegal drugs. So how, if that's one of the signs that the policeman will look at, if a young kid's sitting there, he looks doped up, and his pupils are dilated, and the police says, okay, I suspect you've taken drugs. How can he tell whether it's illegal drugs or legal drugs?
Well, as I've said, for the trained law enforcement officers, they have to undergo rigorous and systematic training for this. And we are actually having this at the moment under the drug driving scheme. And I have...
drug driving, you do a breathalyzer test.
Yes, drug driving.
Drug driving, okay.
Again, and you do that there and then, don't you? You do that there and then.
Do you do that? If you're drug driving, do you take the person back to the police, or you do it right at the scene?
It will be difficult to do it at the scene because it will be too noisy and will attract some audience. So normally the person involved will be taken back to the police station. And in fact, there are very stringent procedures. And I'm pleased to tell you that, in fact, after the launching of this scheme, the police has received no complaint.
And so has the number of drug driving cases gone down?
Yes, exactly.
Michael Vittler. Now, we're talking here about an issue, which is that...
if I can say, not drink driving or not drug driving, because as you rightly said, that involved a prescriptive licensed event that you do, which is drive.
You're driving a car rather than sitting in a bar.
And I think it's not appropriate to say that, well, you are defending that person's life by taking away his liberties, or you're not defending, or you're taking away the family's life, because frankly, drug dependents may be making their family's life a misery, but you're not taking away their life.
But this is what I was going to ask you.
This is confusing terminology.
But this is what I was going to ask you, Mr. Vittler. Now, Daniel Sheck is saying that the number of people on drugs is alarming, and he wants to do something about it.
Great, and I wholeheartedly support.
But where would you put your priority? Protecting a person's civil rights, or saying to yourself, listen, we've got a whole bunch of kids in Hong Kong growing up, they're hooked on drugs, they're doing ketamine, they're dropping out of school, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're turning to crime. And you say, well, maybe there is a middle ground here where you give up some civil rights. Not easily. You go through a very stringent test, like you said,
these are
to help the kids.
These are fundamental basic rights that you have, are protected by the basic law and the Bill of Rights.
We're talking about what comes first, protecting civil rights or saving the kid?
Look, if you're thinking about being proportionate and rational, go about the procedure that I suggested. Divert and give treatment and assistance to, without prosecuting, the first-time offender who's been found with drugs on him, who would otherwise be prosecuted. Why is there not a provision for that? Why do we consistently have, from the government and its various bodies...
Do first-timers go to jail now?
They don't go to jail. They usually get fined, which really doesn't help the situation as well. But the point is, they then have a conviction for a drug offence. They are then diverted to the criminal justice system. Why aren't we having a diversion at the stage where the police conclude they have sufficient evidence to charge someone?
But don't charge.
But don't charge, but they divert them off to a scheme
we do that, Daniel,
for treatment.
My response is his points are well taken. And in fact, it is the purpose of the whole consultation exercise. In fact, we are not expecting people to say that, well, we support your view. In fact, we welcome diversion or even
But why do we consistently have views from the government bureaus, which instead of taking what I would suggest just now, relatively sensible views that are rehabilitative and that don't involve an infringement of rights, why do we consistently have these proposals that involve infringements of our liberties?
I don't think Mr. Sheck is saying that if a person is found without drugs on the body, but looks drugged, and then is taken and the urine test proves positive, that he's going to be diverted to the criminal justice system.
No,
You're saying that the person is going to be given a chance not to.
In fact, this is what we use rescue drug testing scheme. We're trying to
So
rescue
you're not going to divert the person to
Why
criminal.
aren't you rescuing the people who have been stopped, who've been found with drugs on them? Why are you infringing their liberties to rescue them?
But that's
Why
a
do you
different
make it
thing, Michael.
coercive to
That
help
is
them?
different.
That's a different issue.
This all
That-
seems to be so directed towards young people.
No. I'm not targeting young people. Can I respond to
Go right ahead.
the question of whether it is really different from drunk driving or drug driving? Now, of course, it is not within a driving context.
Which is what it's all about.
Yes,
isn't it?
but we have to bear in mind that substance abuse, especially ketamine abuse, has tremendous negative consequence on a person. We see that for some cases, after 3 or 4 years, actually they have to remove their bladder.
That isn't without that. That's not. That's not the question here,
But
is
it is important.
You're
though. I mean, the
talking
kid's
about
removing his bladder.
proportionate.
I'm sorry. People smoke. People die from cancer. You know, and yet you don't have laws which are infringing their personal liberties, guaranteed rights. You know, to deal with cancer and smoking. So you know,
No, I'm talking about
let's
the
be
proportionate
As I
impact.
said, have a proportionate measure. that
Don't you
doesn't
want to help
involve-
kids who are on drugs, Michael?
Absolutely, but deal with it in a way that doesn't infringe their basic civil rights and liberties.
I must reiterate that we are not going to infringe their rights. In
Well, they
fact,
would be. This is
if we
infringement.
have the law.
You are talking of arresting them, searching them, without them having committed any offence.
It would be okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You are proposing arresting, detaining, and searching individuals, and I suggest you are really looking at young people, taking them to another place under detention, and there
With a third party present.
with a third party present. Then, for juveniles, you would have to wait for someone else to attend, a responsible adult to attend. So they will be detained against their will. They'll be arrested against their will, unlawfully and arbitrarily, as far as I'm concerned. They will be detained for a substantial period of time. Then they'll be subject to a forced search without ever having committed an offence.
You know,
I'm sorry, if we legislate or enact a law, it will not be unlawful. I think we must bear
Well,
in
I'm sorry,
mind.
it would be, because it would be unconstitutional.
I would also like to argue against this. As I said, we already got the drug driving ordinance.
but you know, Daniel Sheck, you've got the drug driving
Yeah.
scheme.
And that is constitutional. It is truly lawful.
4 years ago, around that time,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago,
Yeah.
Donald Zhang, the former chief executive, came up with a proposal to
School-
say that
school-
students,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
to have
yeah,
urine
yeah,
tests, in mandatory testing of
yeah.
students, and that got shut down because the society was in uproar and said no. The privacy commissioner came out and said that's infringing on your privacy. Okay, so how is that different from this?
It is very different because
How?
4 years ago, I was also in your program. In fact, that scheme was a voluntary drug testing within a school context. And at that
In
time,
the beginning, it was mandatory.
it was mandatory, but I advised the government to change it to voluntary. And eventually, actually, the scheme was very successful. If we look at the substance abuse figure in Taipo, as compared to the control district.
Is it
Actually-
ongoing, or is it being
Well,
shelved?
I thought the idea is gone.
If it's
No,
successful, why is it
It's
being
a
shelved?
voluntary scheme now.
It is voluntary. It is still implemented in some
But
60
on a
plus.
voluntary basis.
Yes, exactly.
The kid says, okay, test me.
Yeah,
and you
that's
can
true.
do it.
That's true.
Otherwise,
That's
you can't
true.
do it, right?
And as we said, constantly say, it is a measure to enhance the resolve of the kids.
So
to
why
stay
don't you have a voluntary system where you invite kids, where you find drugs on the floor in a bar and they look as though they're in need of help?
That
Why
won't
don't
work
you
because you're in a
invite
bar and you're drunk. You should have
the
volunteer.
same with school kids then. So
Yeah.
you know,
The school kid is not drunk in
this
school.
is the contradiction between it being
No.
compulsory and voluntary.
We
You're
do-
saying it's a successful scheme to make it voluntary. So if you want a scheme, why aren't you making it voluntary first?
Now, of course, we can have both schemes at the same time. We're not talking a mutually exclusive situation.
Daniel
Yeah.
Sheck, I want to ask you this. The police and the public, there isn't a great deal of trust between the two now, okay? With so many other issues going on. the public in some ways have lost trust in the police. How can the public trust that the police are not going to go out and target maybe kids from poor neighborhoods, kids they don't like, kids that talk back, and how do you overcome this trust? There isn't that much trust between the two sides
I got
now.
2 points. The first one is whether the public really has a serious doubt about police. I think it's a matter of debate. Actually, there are different research studies showing that some show that the public might not have great trust in the police, but I have also seen other studies saying that the public still have quite a great deal of
I
trust.
think you'll find that's quite age specific. Given that this whole proposal, as I suggest, is targeted at young people. We're not talking about people walking out of the jockey club here, age 55. We're talking about young kids in their 20s or younger. Now, my question to you, if I may,
I've got 1 minute.
is ask you,
50 seconds.
How many young people do you have on your committee? How many people who are reformed drug
50
abusers
seconds.
do you have on your committee?
There are many. We got
On your committee?
We got a drug liaison committee, and many of them are extra addicts.
On your committee, how many do you have?
We got a lot of youth workers.
On your committee? Because I looked up your committee, and they seem to be very respectful older
I've
people.
got 10 seconds. Michael, are you going to challenge this law if it's passed?
I'm sure a client will be coming forward.
You're
Challenge
sure?
it.
No
And you're
problem.
going to have to fight it.
Well, no problem. I think we're a civil society, and then we can give our views in front of a court and see.
All right, okay. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Good evening.